Hello everyone, welcome. This is Attorneys with Swag. You know my name, Everett Hopkins. And as you'll notice, we are all black. This is the episode 4 for Black History Month, All Black Everything. So let's let you guys introduce yourself just briefly for now. Jubril, you want to go first?
Yeah, again, Jubril Oladirin, from Jamaica, Queens, experienced in the areas of criminal law, civil law, and immigration.
I'm Yanique, criminal defense attorney. I'm from down south. I just happen to be in New York City. But yeah, that's what I do, criminal defense.
Everett Hopkins. I'm an attorney who was born in Brooklyn but grew up in Jamaica, Queens. I've spent most of my life there. I started a firm there called Hopkins Law Group now. It was Hopkins Law and Bailey for a while, now Hopkins Law Group. And I practiced in that area geographically for the last 30 years. Very happy to be here.
All right, cool. So basically I thought this episode was important because this is our month, and we just want to talk to people about what experiences we have as black attorneys, the path we took to get to where we are, why we took that path, the benefits that we have being young black or black attorneys, and the challenges, of course. So with that said, if you want to do a more in-depth introduction of yourself, Yanique. So you say you're from down south. Where
Yes,
exactly?
Houston. Grew up in Houston. Well, actually was born in Kingston. Moved to Houston when I was 10. Went to high school, elementary school, middle school in Houston. And then I went to law school in Florida.
Florida?
Yeah.
Why?
It was on the beach. I went to law school on the beach.
We got beaches up here.
No. These ain't beaches. And it was warm. I was used to the warmth and I couldn't deal with the cold. So I went to law school on the beach and I don't regret it.
All right. So and what brought you up here exactly?
I got a job. Because that was a time when I think after law school it was hard for people to get jobs.
Mm-hmm.
And I applied to one job and I got the job.
Oh, nice.
That was the only job I applied to.
Wow, okay.
I got lucky.
And how long you been doing criminal defense now?
6 years, 7 years in November.
Okay. All right. Jubril, you wanna go? The people know you, but
They don't like him.
Yeah, my adversaries don't let me. You're being an adversary right now. That's what's going on.
That's how you do it.
My story a little bit, but again, from Jamaica, Queens. Then I lived in London for a little bit.
Shout out London.
Shout out London. Shout out North London.
Well, you ain't got no accent.
I do have an accent, actually.
Put it on real quick.
It comes out.
When you make a man, it come out.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
all right.
Depends how passionate I get. Came back to New York, went to undergrad. Then after undergrad, I guess I had a little bit of a break. Then I went to law school. Then after law school, I applied for what I believe was my dream job, and got my dream job. And yes, that's my background.
All right. Dad?
Well, went to the University of Buffalo, which is all the way upstate New York, cold country. Graduated from there. When I came back, I interviewed several places, but the first job I got out of law school was working for the Department of Treasury, which is Internal Revenue Service, by the way. And it was a great experience. I learned so much about taxation, but not only that, how the IRS worked and how it thought, and how it affected people in all income brackets, whether or not they were very wealthy or, in fact, they were below the poverty line, how deductions work, so on and so forth. I enjoyed that because I knew at some point I was headed to private practice because I always wanted to work in my community, and I'll get to that in a moment. But when I left there, I then, didn't jump right out into private practice. I worked for HPD, which is Housing Preservation and Development in New York City. And I got a really good education about real estate and housing in New York. And in fact, how important housing was, how it could be an economic advantage to you if you knew how to work with real estate. But I also looked at how the homeless were being affected, because there was a big homeless crisis in New York City I'd say in the early to mid 80s, and what the city was doing about it, what the administration was doing about it. And I felt good about doing something where I was helping people, really helping people with HPD. And I worked for the deputy commissioner there, and then I got tapped by New York City Criminal Justice Agency, most people know as CJA. That's the agency that assists people getting released on their own recognizance, or at least having a low bail set.
When they're arrested of a crime, right?
When they're arrested of a crime, not convicted. We only
Right.
dealt with arrest to arraignment.
Mhm.
So the job there was to work with police department, DA's office, of course, legal aid defense counsels, to do what we could to provide the court with enough information so someone could get released. And a lot of young people get arrested and really don't need to spend a night in jail, and certainly don't need to have to come up with bail money. And this is before bail reform kicked in. So it was something I was proud to do. We even worked with the legislature in fine tuning what should be done to establish someone has, I'm sure you all know, community ties.
Right.
What is community ties? What does it really
Right.
mean? Okay?
Right, right.
You know, that you have a place to return to at home, someone who will stand up in court for you, you live with an uncle, a father, or son, whatever. But the whole point was, I was always the type of person who always wanted to have my hands around working within my own community. And see, that came naturally to me because my father is a local businessman. He's a barber. He's had in fact, he has the oldest barbershop in Queens now, some 54 years.
Oh.
And that
Can I get a free haircut?
yeah,
No.
It's all about.
No, free?
You said yes.
You gotta put
No,
money
no,
back
you gotta
into the
give back to the
neighborhood.
community.
The first one's
That's
free.
it.
but it is true.
You gotta put back, you can't take out.
Boy, you know, you kick something to me. And
Okay.
I got
You work it out. Well, even if you don't pay, we'll get out you some kind of way. Community service, something. But, you know, what I saw was very powerful. My father, who is a black man, started a barbershop there were no barbershops in Southeast Queens at that time. It really wasn't. People had to go to Brooklyn.
When was this?
Long Island. He opened the barbershop in 1966. And I remember I was 10 years old because I was there the night he was trying to get it open. And a very funny story was that the night he was actually going to open it the day after the 4th of July in 1966. And the health inspector was coming. That's why I remember this so well. But again, this all goes back to being community-based and how he had promised all these people he's going to open up, and all the people were saying, yeah, we want this to happen. And someone was supposed to show up, literally on the 4th of July, for the health inspector to inspect on the 5th of July. Someone's supposed to show up to put in a vent in the ceiling of the bathroom. You have to have a vent. And if you don't, then you don't get your license, you can't open. So we actually waited on the 4th of July for somebody who never showed up. And I remember my dad climbing up on the roof and actually sawing a hole in the roof while I sat there. And I was a 10-year-old kid standing. I stood up on the toilet, I closed and stood up on the toilet, waiting for a screwdriver to come through, where he was hitting it with a hammer. And he finally got it through, put the vent in, and Hopkins barbershop was born.
Wow.
So, but I saw when he opened up on the 5th, the place was loaded. And people thanked him and said, we don't have to go any place else. And then he began to hire guys and train guys in barbering. And the first place he went was people who were being released from jail. And he helped them get their license, okay? They had been incarcerated, got out. He helped them get their apprentice license. He would stand up for them, and he taught them the skill. And what I loved is the community accepted it. They said, all right, he's new, but let's work with him. You're trying to work with him. Because why? Because you're helping to build a community, and you're helping keep this man out of jail. He's now got a job. He can feed his family.
Yep.
So over that 50-year period, he has always worked with young men and even older men to help them get the trade. And you know what? He was even big enough to reach out and help them open their own barbershop. Now that comes back to me, because you gotta realize, I grew up watching this.
Right.
I saw the power of working in your own community and having your own, and how you impacted others. So I said, you know what? I have to think about what I wanted to be. I considered medicine at one point. I considered law. Then I ran into a gentleman named Judge Leroy Kellum, who actually attended the same church. And he loved the law. He just loved the law, and he talked about how we should all at least think about law school, because the only way we're going to get ahead is understanding the law and knowing someone's taking advantage of us, and how to fight for them and how to fight for others. So he invited me down to his courtroom, right there on Queens Boulevard, criminal court. And he said, I want you to show up on Monday. Now, here I am, I'm a college kid, okay? I want you to come to my courtroom and I want you to see what goes on. So I showed up the next day, and I realized I'm a young black man walking in. I have on an army jacket.
And what year is this?
This is about 1978, okay? So I got the big afro.
Bell bottoms?
You know, flares. I never was another
High top, bell bottoms?
I got flares on.
Wait. What kind of afro? The Michael Jackson 5 afro?
Well, I didn't have
Not
that much
thing, you got
hair.
all your hair.
But it was the type hair that when you walked into the courtroom, somebody said, "Where's he going?" It was definitely that kind of hair. And you know, with the peace sign on, but the fist patch on this right on. And I walked in, and of course the court officer was like, "Sit down." All right, I said, oh, okay, you know, I have a sit down. And then Judge Kellum pointed over the bench and said, bring him up here. And at that time, the reaction of the court officers, none of whom were African American or Latino, like, okay.
Of course.
What a shocker.
All right, we got business now, okay? Come on up here. So I'm walking up. They said, stand there, all right? Put your hands down, all right? And Judge Kellum leaned over and said, I didn't say there. Bring him up here, right here.
Like next to him,
Yeah.
basically, on the bench.
On the bench. I want him up here. And
They
they're
were
looking at me and
shocked.
looking at the judge like, what's going on, Judge? They're looking at each other. And by the way, get him a chair. Get him a chair. So from that point on, the tone changed, should we say.
Yeah.
The officers got a chair and brought it up, and Judge Kellum sat me there for an entire day when he did his business. And it was phenomenal, which helped shape me. And I remember a couple of things in particular. There was a young man who was arrested for doing something in the subway. I think he may have been smoking, he may have had marijuana, and I remember Judge Kellum leaned over to me and says, I want you to pay attention to this. I want you to look at this. So the evidence really isn't clear here, but I'm gonna show you how to work this. So the young man came up and he began to explain himself with his attorney, and he told him to be quiet. But the young man was animated and continued to try to explain. And Judge Kellum then addressed him and says, young man, whatever you were doing in the subway, don't do it again. And as he tried to talk again, he says, young man, you're not getting it. Whatever you were doing in the subway, don't do it again. I think it took about 3 times for him to realize that Judge Kellum was trying to say, you're about to go home.
Right.
Just shut your mouth,
Right.
okay?
Yeah.
And he leaned over to me and said, a lot of young people don't get it. And this is my time to show them how to get it. And then when the young man got it, he said, thank you, Judge. He said, just talk to your lawyer. He said, you know, sometimes police aren't bad guys, they make mistakes too. So he talked to the prosecutors, and he said that maybe your officers didn't quite understand what was going on that day. So tell them maybe they need to think about what they do. And he sent everybody home. The point is, look at the impact.
Right.
You had a young man looking at another black man who understood what he was going through.
Right.
And understood that I don't need to give you a criminal record. You don't need a violation, you don't need a misdemeanor, you certainly don't need a felony. Let me send you home.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's definitely a good segue as to, you know, why exactly did, you know, each one of you want to go to law school? You know, I mean, for me, it was like, I mean, you know, I guess you see where it comes from now, right?
Right,
Because,
yeah.
like, you know, we always wanted to make a change in the community. And, you know, the best way to do that is, you know, I felt, you know, being a lawyer. But for some reason, I wanted to do criminal law. You know, I just felt that there was more of a need for black attorneys in criminal law, and especially criminal defense, you know, because one with civil law, I didn't really understand it as much. I mean, I know you did it for a long time, but there were just a lot of things that I didn't understand it, you know, that way. And I just thought that, you know, liberty was more important than money, you know, so, which, you know, to some it is. And so I felt that criminal law was the best way to go. And plus, it was just, you know, people, it's always in your face more. You know, people see crime, they see the TV shows, it's always about criminal law. Nobody really has TV shows about civil law and stuff like that. So, for me,
It's not sexy.
Right.
right, exactly,
It
you know?
ain't.
Yeah, it's not attractive, you know? So, that's why I really want to do criminal law for the most part. But, you know, Jubril, what about you?
Oh, how did you feel about that though? Like that, I guess he followed in your footsteps in becoming an attorney, but not becoming a civil attorney.
Actually, I'm very proud of that, okay? Because attorneys who wanted to go into criminal law right out of law school really found it hard economically, because you had people who really couldn't pay what they needed to pay to take care of that. So by me going into civil law and creating this particular situation, I think it allowed him to really fill a void that I couldn't fill at that time. Okay, so I'm very proud of the fact that he went there. I'm very happy he's there, and I think he should stay there as long as he has the passion for it. Okay. Now, am I looking for somebody?
AKA, I
ain't trying to hire your ass yet. I ain't trying to hire your ass yet.
Well, it comes to a point that he has to make his own decisions.
Right.
Okay, and you got to feel good. Now, what I do, and you got to understand something. Being an independent practice is not easy. Okay, you got to love it. You got to like it. It's 24/7. Okay, all right. I will tell you, I enjoyed watching the Super Bowl because I'm a football fan. But when it was over, I went home,
Back to
powered up the
work.
laptop, and I'm at it at 2, sometimes 3 o'clock in the morning. But so it's okay. Does it pay you? Of course it does. It has to stay in
Right.
business, all right? And part of what civil law does do, it does pay you if you pick the right areas and you know how to work it, okay? My colleagues who started in criminal law, because there were a few of them, caught hell until they were able to incorporate civil with the criminal practice. They had to do it to survive,
Right.
okay? And now that they do both, it kind of evens out. So they can wait on certain things when dealing with criminal cases where the money may not be there, and the civil cases, the money is there, you know? But again, it's something you gotta love. But I love what I do because I'm in my own community, and my father caught 5 generations ahead, believe it or not, okay? The beauty is I'm beginning to do the same thing because the same people who I filed bankruptcy for, I got them to buy a house a year later because all their debt was free. And the banks were flexible, especially during that area. Those same people now, I'm doing trust for and setting them up to pass on the generational wealth
To their kids.
to their kids, so it's not taken by Medicaid, so on and so forth. So I'm looking at generations now come in, and now I'm representing my colleagues' children who are trying to buy property and set themselves up and develop wealth and be able to talk to them and point them in the right direction when it comes to developing economic wealth. So it's all really good stuff.
That's very interesting. And see, these are the things that, I think that a lot of people in our community don't know.
They don't.
They don't know how to keep generational wealth.
Right.
And so that stuff is important. Like a lot of people don't do wills.
But we're not really taught those things.
Exactly, we're not
growing
taught
up.
those
It's not
things. We don't even know what it
It's
is.
not
Like-
a forefront of your growing up.
Exactly, yeah. Bankruptcy, we don't know anything about, how to do that, which this might give me an episode to do, bankruptcy. So you might come back for that.
Okay.
Just putting it in your ear now.
And real estate, too.
And real estate,
Very
exactly.
important.
Very
Yeah.
important.
Yeah, so, it's all about how,
Especially in New York City, real estate.
yeah, definitely.
Especially here.
Yeah. So,
And you have, and see, that's very important because, there are people who walk in my office and say, well, I really don't have anything. I paid for my house and I helped my daughter and son get a house and I bought it, 30 years ago and I paid $60,000 for it. Well, the house is worth $700,000 now. So how can you say you don't have anything?
Right.
Okay? And you can now take that item and you can move it into a trust.
Right.
Where now if you get ill, it passes on to your heirs, but even better, it's protected. What's happening in our community is our parents, grandfathers, they paid for a house, say, oh, I've got this house, oh yeah, I'll pass it on. You know what? They end up getting sick.
Yep.
They end up going to a nursing home, or
Yep.
they need care at home.
Yep.
The government puts a lien on it,
Yep.
okay?
And they take it.
And they take it.
Yeah.
I mean, there are people who walk in my office years later thinking they inherited something, and they get a bill from the government that says you owe $500,000.
Yep.
Literally $500,000.
That's crazy.
So that house that you thought mom and dad gave you, well, they didn't really give it to you.
Yep.
It's going
Government
back
took
to the
it.
government. So those type of things are just as important because now, thank God, some of us have been able to amass certain things, get an education, develop, some wealth. We've got to pass it on and not lose it.
Right.
And see, what's happening is our white brethren know this. Okay?
They do.
They
That's
do.
why they got all the
All
trusts.
their stuff is in trust.
Yep.
Right. Yeah.
Okay?
Right.
And
Our
as
stuff
soon as
isn't.
they can put it in there, they do.
That's right.
Yeah.
And you got to do it early. And see, the shame of it is, if we're not putting our finances in place like in trust, that means not only are we paying for our care, we're paying for for everybody's care.
Yep.
And that's a shame, okay? So we're paying for the rest of the world. And we worked twice as hard to get it. We paid highest interest rates in most cases to get it,
Yeah.
Yes,
okay,
that's a fact.
than our white counterparts, although our credit rate is good, so it's a double shame.
Right.
So, well, I respect certainly all y'all in criminal law, and you need to stay there. It's not like we can
Ooh,
leave
Chile.
criminal law and move on to another area of law. We've got to stay there. But at the same
Ooh,
time,
Chile.
we've got to get into other things to begin protecting our wealth, okay? Because that's what's necessary.
Well, with that said, so the reason why I became an attorney, there's a multitude of reasons, but like, I guess it started like as an adolescent. I guess the kind of crowd I was running with, they kind of like fell victims to the system. And for the longest time, like, we never really trusted the attorneys that represented them. And for the most part, the attorneys that represented them were usually white
They
or
look
Jewish
like us.
attorneys, correct? And you know, I believe it was a misconception because sometimes you get that attorney that we know now, because we know attorneys that are black, white, Hispanic, and some of them are really good.
And some are really bad.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so like it doesn't really matter the color of your skin. It's like your passion and your intellect. So what drove me is because like all of my closest friends like can't become attorneys based on what has happened to them in their life. You know, like they're barred from doing it based on their life experiences. And I wanted to represent that demographic. I wanted to represent them in a sense, like, you know, and even there's things that I do today just to ensure certain things for them to, you know, some things are still an appeal process, you know, you try to appeal something, but when I look at communities that I go into and I speak to the younger generations, I just don't want like people to fall victim like how they did. And God's my witness, I'm just lucky to be here because I could have got caught up in certain situations.
Hello?
Right.
Yeah.
All of us.
Yes, yes.
That's a whole other discussion, but you're right about any one of us. Well, go ahead, I'm sorry. Sir.
Yes. So, but that was my driving passion to
Right,
become
right.
a criminal defense attorney,
Right.
as opposed to being an attorney, which is just, it's nice for the title. I'm an attorney, I'm educated and
Right,
whatnot,
right.
but that's why I want to be a criminal
See,
defense attorney.
and I'm gonna get to you, Yanique, but like I think that's kind of what I see it too. I think the most important thing is not falling into that category,
Right.
right? So you can't even get to these civil issues, you know, like putting property into, you know, trust and stuff like that, until you can just survive and get out of a certain community.
Just on a basic
you know, just
level.
on a basic level. So until you can survive police encounters.
Yes.
You know, if you're worried about police encounters, you're not even thinking about, oh,
Amen to that.
I'm gonna go
house
buy
and
this
everything.
house.
Right, exactly. Yeah. So that's why I think that at a baseline, you know, that's why I wanted to do criminal law. You know, so what about you, Yanique? Why you do why criminal law?
So I went to law school right after college because, like I said, when I graduated college, there was really no jobs out there because that was really right when the recession hit and
Yep.
everything, and there was no jobs. So
Yeah.
I said, all right, law school. My first year, I actually interned at a corporate law firm in Kingston, Jamaica. I hated it.
Really?
Yes.
Wait, just you're from Kingston, Jamaica?
Yeah.
I thought you were from Kingston, Texas.
No, shut up.
It kind of sounded that way. You didn't say Jamaica.
I mean, I only know one Kingston.
Right, exactly. Common sense will tell you.
I only know one Kingston.
So I interned at a corporate law firm, and I absolutely hated it. It was boring. They were talking about debentures, and I was just like, I don't care about all this money. Y'all get that together. I don't care about
How long
this.
were you there for?
I was there for the entire summer, and I don't know how I did it the entire summer. It was just absolutely boring. I was like, this is so boring. How do people do this? So my third year in law school, I wanted out of law school. I felt like I was in too long, 3 years. I feel like I was doing a prison bid. I was just tired. So my third year, second semester, I got an internship at the Miami-Dade Public Defender's Office. Went down to Miami-Dade, and every day, just so happened the court part I interned in, the judge was black. Every day you see the same people coming in. I was like,
Same,
wow.
like literally the same.
yeah, like
people,
black,
or-
no, same,
Oh, the same
race,
type of
black
people. Yeah,
people,
yeah.
Hispanic people. In my head, I'm like, white people don't get arrested? You know, I just, because I didn't grow up in that kind of environment to know what really happens as far as criminal law. I grew up not sheltered, But I didn't grow up in a situation where I saw those things every day. It wasn't until I really went out on my own that I saw, like, wow, white people don't get arrested, really, you know? So when I went to intern, I was there for an entire semester, and I was like, wow, this is fun. You know, the different issues that you deal with, from murder to rape, just so many different facets of what you can do. Even immigration at the time, because the immigration laws were really ramping up at that time and people getting deported. And so that's really how I got into criminal law, just interning a whole semester and seeing that, yeah, I could do this. And my people getting arrested, I could do this. I gotta do this.
Right. Yeah.
And the office I worked in, I will probably count on one hand how many people of color were in the office. And they were representing people that look like me.
Yeah. Shoot, it's like that now, you know.
It's
So,
still like that,
yeah.
but you know,
Yeah.
to go to law school and think, oh, okay, there's black attorneys out there representing our people, you realize, nope, not that many of us out there.
Nope, not at
So
all.
that's how I got into criminal law.
All right. So I mean, so we all went to law school at different times, and so I want to do a comparison. Like, you know, what were your experiences in law school? You know, how did you find? How difficult was it? Were there good parts about it, bad parts about it, like memorable parts? Like, just talk briefly about that.
Memorable?
I mean, I had fun in law school, but we did have, I think the more challenging classes were like constitutional law class, because there was a stark divide in like constitutional law. Like,
What
you
do you
know,
mean?
it's like, because when we would start talking about Brown versus Board of Education, those like seminal cases that we know, one of my law professors was actually the law professor that, the attorney that argued Gideon versus Wainwright.
Wow.
And he was still, Bruce Jacobs, he was still actively teaching, even though Gideon versus Wainwright was done like in the 60s or something like that. He was actively teaching. But constitutional law, I remember distinctively, one of our classmates was just like, well, if I have a red cup, are they gonna stop me based on a red cup? And the teacher's like, a red cup is not the same as being stopped based on race or things being decided based on race. Obviously, this was a white boy who just didn't understand the dynamics of it. And I think it was even a little harder because I went to law school down south. I went to law school in Florida. So you know, they don't know if they're Republican or Democrat over there. So,
That's a fact. Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
they don't. It's true, every year. They don't know.
So you, what about you, Jubril?
Okay, so law school, it had its highlights. I guess the biggest thing for law school for me was the switch, like, because I had some time off and then I went to law school. So it was like all the reading, all the assignments, you know, 3, 4, 5-hour exams. Like that was just a wake-up call to see, like, oh my God, this is what lawyers go through and whatnot. But then you get into like very interesting topics like constitutional law, and there were heated debates because affirmative action. That was a very heated debate, and you know, and then you hear people's viewpoints on the subject, and then you're like, oh, okay, this person was befriending me, but then is very upset about the rights and laws that are in place. And then the curve, and I always remember about like. I got like 90 something on my test for a practice test. Before curve. And on that assignment, I ended up getting a C because everybody else got like a 95, 96, 97, 98. And like, I was thinking like, oh, I'm doing enough. Like that's an A in undergrad.
Right, but not
That's
here.
not here.
Imagine taking that test to your mom. Mom, I got a 90. Why I say C?
Right.
You getting your ass beat.
Exactly.
For a 90. Yeah.
So that was a real wake up
I
call.
think that law school really, like, you know, when you get these heated debates in law school, because really you're there to debate. Like, that's what we do as lawyers. So they teach you how to debate. And I think people's true colors do come out.
I'm like,
you
we
know?
can't be friends if
So
that's how you
you
feel.
see everybody's thought process and, you know, kind of how they grew up and how they view other people and how they view other situations. So I think that was the most interesting thing to me in law school. Like, you know, there was really no hiding. You know, there was no hiding who you really were.
Not
You
in
had
those
to,
classes.
Yeah, in the constitutional law and stuff
Yeah.
like that. Yeah. Criminal law too. You know, criminal law stuff like that. So, but you know, well, I'll leave that for a side. But so Dad, so you said you went to SUNY Buffalo, right?
That's correct.
In law school.
That's correct.
And what year was that?
Why you gotta be putting them on the spot like that?
What?
It's all right.
Well, what 70s?
It's okay.
You know.
It was in the 70s. I started the end of the 70s, was 79 when I went to law school.
So what made you leave New York City and go all the way up to Buffalo?
There was two reasons. Reason number one is being in New York City, I had a good time,
Distractions.
a lot of friends, and I know that wasn't gonna work. Okay, that's number one.
Cabin.
The cabin. That's right. We should digress and talk about the cabin.
Yeah.
My guys called me all the time. This before cell phones, so I had to get my own phone in the house so I wouldn't wake up my folks. So the second was really money because they gave me a scholarship. So, you know, I applied to a number of schools, but this was the only one that gave me a full ride. So I said, well, let me head on up,
Right.
okay? But let me tell you, Buffalo, New York at that time was nothing like New York City. In fact, when you got there, you really thought you were in a different state.
And it's still like that?
Yeah, it's still
Yeah,
like
I
that
have
today.
family in Buffalo.
Well, probably, but this is really big difference. I would say it's not as bad as it used to be when it came to minorities because you now have, who I happen to know, the mayor of Buffalo is a guy named Byron Brown, who's a black man, okay, who in fact, we've gone to Saint Attorney. But the thing is, when I arrived in Buffalo, I knew it was a different world.
Right.
The thing, and I'll be very honest, the thing that saved me is that there were 4 of us from New York City, and we became brothers, okay?
For people or for black folks?
Well, we had 3 black and 1 Hispanic, but we were all from New York City, and we became as tight as a clam shell because of how we were looked at and how we were perceived. We were stopped by campus security all the time. All right, forget leaving campus. We couldn't even drive on campus without getting stopped, okay?
Wow.
We were in class where a professor, who I'll leave anonymous, says he wasn't sure minorities were ready to be in law school at that
Wow.
time.
And that was the time.
Okay,
Yeah.
during that time.
That's the 70s, yeah. What's
Yeah.
that
But
like?
it was late 70s. I would expect.
Now,
Right.
My bad.
Hey, we have editors.
so I mean, you got to look at how this was. We became they even gave us a nickname. They called us New York Borough Boys. They didn't tell us that to our face, but that's what they called us. All right, and yeah, we were different. And I remember us being in civil procedure, and we were asked to address a particular case that dealt with employment discrimination, and how we answered this particular problem. We all answered it basically the same way, but we were the only ones
That
in
answered
that
it like
section.
that.
That's right. All right.
Yeah.
All our white counterparts saw it totally different. Now, we were right on point. Don't think that we weren't. But the professor asked us to rewrite the paper based on how the white kids saw it, which was a separate way of looking at the law.
That's a little hard, ain't
Yeah,
it?
well, yeah, it was practically impossible.
Because I don't see it from your perspective at all.
We ended up being renegades, I will tell you that. But I will tell you, you know, you got to remember things that you think are your worst experience end up being your blessing. It made us really good students because we knew we were looked at differently, okay? We knew we were being counted out. We were saw as affirmative action, which is the biggest insult you could give
Yes.
somebody.
Right,
Yes.
All right?
Like y'all wouldn't be here just
For your
Y'all
skin
smart.
color.
Skin color.
Right.
You know,
Yeah,
we
exactly.
know you're not qualified. You know
Right.
what? A lot of them failed out. We didn't. We were at the top of our class. Okay, and we knew we had to be. So while that pressure was on us, you know, we were sort of like the modern day Meshach. Shadrach and Abednego, because we walked through the fire, and I think it all made us much better attorneys because of that, and we're friends to this day. We're
That's
really
good.
tight friends to this day. But my experience there was very challenging. Buffalo was very challenging, but we did have some good people around us who wanted to really see us succeed within the community as well as within the law school. We had 1 or 2 friends in the law school who helped us along. And at the time, there was an attorney general who was a black man up in Buffalo who actually hired me to be an intern up there, which also helped, helped my situation out quite a bit. But listen, I don't want you to think that law school was horrible, because we had a whole lot of fun up there.
Yeah,
We did
fun, too.
We had good fun.
What kind of fun y'all had in Buffalo?
Right? Y'all went up to Canada? Because I know it ain't that far.
My son, I love you.
That ain't none of your business.
That is none of your business. Besides, your mother's gonna look at this and say,
If you trying to get your daddy in trouble. Stay out of grown folks'
What up,
business.
editors? I'm
man.
looking at y'all, man. Point taken. I hear you. That's fine.
Move on.
thank you.
All right. So, I mean, I want to fast forward a little bit. So, you know, your first experience in the courtroom as a young black attorney, you know, obviously has its challenges. So, you know, you want to talk about, if you remember, like, you know, your very first day.
Oh, I remember.
What was it like?
First day I walked in, you got to sit down and wait for your attorney.
Facts. That's
So
insane.
I'm like, who are you talking to? He said,
Same.
you. I said, why? So I'm a little bit of a rebel. Right? Just
Are
a
you?
little
To
bit.
say the least.
Are you?
Just a little bit.
Yeah.
And I looked at him like, please to get out of my face. Actually, that's probably said, get the hell out of my face. And he was like, I said, don't you see this file? I'm here waiting on a client. That was my very first day
And
at
I'm
work.
guessing you weren't dressed in, like, you know, jeans. And,
No, I had on a suit.
Exactly. That was my experience. Like, my
Even a
experience was.
judge did that to us.
How
That's
nice was
wild.
the suit?
A judge did that to us.
Right. That was me too, though. I mean, so when I got there, obviously, you know, I'm suit, tie, everything.
Suited up.
Wearing glasses, got my files in my hand, and I go and I sit down in the front row, right? Because why?
You're an attorney.
The sign says the front row is only for police officers and attorneys. So I sit in the front row. So I'm sitting there, I'm waiting for my case to be called, and, you know, a court officer says, you can't sit here. And I'm like, what you mean I can't sit here? It's like, no, this is only for attorneys and police officers. So now, there's two things, right? One, you calling me stupid.
Right.
Like, because I can't read. Like, I can't read the sign that's right in front of you. So
Right.
now you saying I can't read. I'm already offended. And two, clearly it's only for certain people of a certain
Or
pigment.
what you think.
Yeah,
Looks
exactly.
like an attorney or police officer.
Right. So that was my experience, and that went on for several months.
Oh, yeah.
Until people got to know me.
Yes.
And stuff like that. And I think, like, you know, for me personally, my first couple of months being an attorney was really hard, right?
It's
And
rough.
I was talking about this to a friend. I was actually on his podcast earlier this week. Shout out Two Black Boys podcast. I was on y'all. And we were talking about how basically there's something that black people do that's pretty much we're born with, and it's kind of like a code switch, you know, like how you know how to talk to certain people, you know, rather than how, you know, you might talk to your friends or whatever. We're basic, and we don't even think about it, right? And
offending.
but it's also like in the professional world where like you really have to, you know, just be careful of your emotions,
Yes.
of how you portray yourself. You know, now I could have, you know, changed the tone of my voice and said something, you know, just a little bit deeper than the way I said it. It's like, oh, what do you mean? I could have been like, what you mean? You know, something like that. And
It would have escalated.
exactly, it would escalate just on my body language, and it's something that, especially as a big black man, you got to be careful of when you're
Right.
around certain people. Like, and it's just something that no one taught me that. It's just something, but you know that, right? I'm sure you know that.
And we get called the angry black woman.
I didn't,
Exactly.
I didn't teach you that.
Sure seemed angry to me.
You want credit for that too? Nah, but like, I mean, listen, I don't remember you teaching it to me. How about that?
Probably by
He wasn't
example.
listening.
I wasn't.
He
He
wasn't
doesn't
listening.
listen.
I didn't listen all the time. You're right. But you know, so it was just, it's a very different path than what other attorneys, white attorneys, have to deal
Yeah.
with, right?
First
you know,
6
'cause-
months were rough.
Right. Yeah. No one's really challenging the fact that you know, went to law school and you deserve to be there. You know, so
It's like we
that was
passed the
really
same
rough.
bar exam.
Yeah. Exactly. You know. So what about you?
failed
You
the
remember?
first time.
Mm.
I have so many instances. I feel like I got PTSD that they're merging together.
No, I agree.
That's real. Yeah.
The first time I don't recall, but I can tell you one time. I'm walking into the court, into the well to talk to a clerk. And I'm dressed up I think I look fantastic.
Of course you do.
I got,
Of course you do.
I got a nice, I got a
Today,
nice.
like today, over.
You didn't compliment. You complimented me, man.
No, he
I got a nice briefcase. I got a nice briefcase. It's shiny. It's new. My shoes are shiny. They're new. I'm fresh. Like, you know what I'm
You
saying?
fresh head to toe,
I'm
right?
fresh.
Right,
All
right.
right.
So I'm walking towards the clerk, and I had, step out the well. Step out the well.
They can't be talking to you.
Yeah. So I said, you, pointing at me, and I was like, so I immediately, actually, I step out, and then I catch myself. I'm like, I'm an attorney.
doing? Yeah,
Like,
yeah.
and
What
he's
am
like,
I doing?
he's like, oh, so let me see your ID.
All the
And I was
time.
like, okay, I show him my ID, and then he takes it from me, and he looks over it like,
Is
looks
it
at
real?
me,
real?
Right. Is
Looks
this
at-
ID real?
goes, okay, next time you need to tell me. Like, okay. Meanwhile, I just saw a bunch of other people do the same thing
Right.
that I
Nothing
was
was
trying
said.
to do.
Nothing happened.
Yeah.
Yeah. You know, but you know what? Like, it's like back to my example. Like, he didn't ask for my ID. He didn't even ask me for my ID. He just assumed.
Oh, that's
He just
always the
assumed,
first thing. It's
right?
always
Like,
an
if
assumption.
if you don't know, then just say, hey,
And that's my
are
problem.
you an attorney?
Just
I've never seen you
ask.
here before.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Just
exactly.
ask.
You know, I've
I
never seen you.
I
here.
can respond with you saying, hey,
Yeah.
I've never seen you. Are you an attorney?
Right.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
can
that's
answer
fine. I
that.
get
But then
that.
to say, hey, get up. I'm
Yeah.
like, sir, what are you talking to?
Yeah, they give us IDs, so
And so that's the same thing too, because like I'm looking at court officer in my head is like a police officer. He has a gun. He has this. So I'm
No,
here,
not fam.
I'm here, step
but that's how
out.
they look to our clients. They
Yeah,
look
that's
like
how.
that.
But that's how it felt to me at the time. Like step out. I'm like, what's gonna happen? Am I gonna get like something happen to me right now?
Yeah,
Right.
you know,
Yeah,
you up,
you're right.
you don't know. You know, you remember your first experience? in
Well,
the
you know,
courtroom?
my first experience actually was just before I became an attorney, and it was up in Buffalo, New York. I told you a few minutes ago, I actually interned for the Attorney General, and I was there for quite some time. During that time, I met quite a few court personnel, you know, certainly a lot of the court officers, because I was going back and forth across the street to the court and to the AG's office. And in my third year, we were taking trial technique. And the trial technique culminated in you actually putting on a trial in a courtroom downtown Buffalo. And you're assigned to a judge, okay? And what happened was, this was the day we were supposed to go and meet with this judge, okay? This particular judge sat over quite a few criminal cases. And in fact, she was known for handing out some pretty rough sentences, okay? That being said, a friend of mine, one of my posse from New York City, were in the same class, and we went to the courtroom that evening, because it was in the evening when you did it after court for the trial technique. And we walked in, and we watched this judge jump up from the bench and run to the phone. Now, most of the other students were in there, one or two came in behind us, but we were the only two men of color who walked in. And it was an abrupt move, but I noticed it. I guess I noticed abrupt moves.
That's crazy.
And,
That's
and we
do.
went in, and, and we're getting ready to have a seat. And she's standing by the phone after she hung it up, and we sat down, and lo and behold, what busted through the door was about 4 court officers. And they came in. Now, mind you, me and my colleague knew them, because we're back and forth.
Right.
So they're coming in looking for what she looking for. And we watched the motion and pointed at us. And they looked at us. And I'm like, they said, what's going on? I said, I don't know. We just got here. So they looked at the judge and like, what are you doing? She says, well, who are they? They're students.
You know, we
The
can
court
speak.
officers told them.
Right.
Yeah, you know, did you ask
Did you
us?
ask?
You know?
Yeah.
Right.
Well, I don't know. I didn't know who you were. And the funny thing at that time, I'll have to say we were in the third year. And while we had a history in Buffalo, the majority of students finally began to get us. They understood we could actually speak, talk. We were actually smart. We could get things done.
Right.
So we had actually changed some of them who actually apologized on behalf of the judge. They didn't have to. The judge should apologize, but she never did. But that was, which I'm sure very fits into what you all have dealt with.
Yeah.
Now, there have been others, but I think that actually is the one that stands out the most in my mind. That this judge, because she saw 2 men of color come in, could not in any way, and we're dressed like students, and we're carrying books, okay? To her, you're defendants.
But she can't reconcile in her head that 2 men of color are actually in law school
Exactly.
and trying to do better.
And it was very clear the level of bias because during that whole time, she couldn't really talk to us. You know, she
I
was
mean,
like,
I would have been uncomfortable if I would have did that.
But again, that's on her. But that was the most that stands out in my mind to this day.
Still happening in 2020.
Yeah.
All right, so this is a good time to do the segment that we always do, laws you don't know, you want to know. Basically, we're going to be talking about, well, mostly me, talking about car stops. We're all lawyers.
I'll try.
We'll all talk about it. So it's car stops. Basically, when they can search your car and what can they search. All right, so generally, police officers should only be searching your car for just a couple reasons, right? If they think that there's a criminal activity, so a perfect example of that would be, if a police officer pulls you over for a busted taillight, then he goes to your window and says, license, registration, yada, yada, and he smells marijuana or he smells alcohol, all right? Which that would be a crime because he might think you're driving under the influence, okay? Or that you have possession of, drugs.
Sorry, just to jump in real quick. So if he pulls you over for like the tail light, busted tail light, he has to look for the instrumentalities of the crime.
Right.
There's nothing else he should be looking for unless it's in plain view that can.
That's the second way, plain view, right.
Oh, good segment. But there's nothing he should be looking for the busted tail light other than to get your license and registration and then give you a ticket for a busted tail light or give you a warning and say, fix it.
Right.
But now, like, he smells marijuana.
That's always the default, though.
That's always a
Yeah,
default.
they always smell marijuana.
Whenever there's a car search, they smell marijuana or something like that. That's the most frequent thing that I see. And the second one, which is what Jubril brought up, is something in plain sight. So if he's pulling you over for a busted taillight, and police officers are allowed to look into your car from the outside through the windows, right? So they can even use a flashlight, and if they see something, on the floor that they might think is a bag of drugs because it's labeled a bag of drugs, that's real. That really happened. Google it. It happened in Florida.
It's Florida.
Yeah. Ain't that your state? No.
Nah, don't do it like that.
They sent a bag of drugs.
I'm telling you, Google it now. There was somebody arrested in Florida after the police pulled him over. They suspected there were drugs in the bag because the bag said bag full of drugs. So
Only Florida that happens.
Florida man be doing stuff. So if they see, obviously if they see a gun or a butt of a gun or
That's
something
it.
like that, that's it.
You
So
go
they
to
can
big
search your
boy
car,
jail.
all right?
Well, just to jump in on that, sometimes they see a butt of the gun after they've searched the car. So they're walking up in plain view. You've hidden the gun pretty well, so they can't see it. But however, after they tell you they smell marijuana and tell you to get out of the car, search the
There
car,
it is.
there's the gun where they
Yeah.
found it, where you hid it.
Exactly.
But they saw it in plain view.
Right, exactly. So, now what I mean by search, right? Generally, they can only search the area where the passengers sit, right? So that's the inside of the car. That does not include the trunk. That does not include the glove box. That does not include the hood, stuff like that. They can only search the passenger area of the
It's
area.
usually like
right?
the grabbable area.
They call it the grabbable area, right? So, I know me personally, I keep my glove box locked, and I keep the trunk locked. It's covered. I drive like a hatchback or whatever. So you can't see in the trunk. The glove box is locked. But, there is also a third way they search the car is if you're driving while black. So I get pulled over all the time, and they pull me out of the car. Now, police can order you out of the car for any reason, but that doesn't give them a license to search the car when they pull you out. Okay, so a lot of times it's by undercover cops. The uniform cops, they don't really, tell me to get out the car or anything, but the undercovers tell me to get out the car. They're looking for stuff. Yeah. I drive a sports car with tints that is registered at a state. Now, the tints are legal in that state that I've registered in, but, they wouldn't be legal if the car was registered in New York. But, driving while black, yada, yada, I get pulled out of the car all the time. So I have a habit of keeping all my information in the visor so I don't have to go in my glove box.
So they can say
right?
they saw inside of the glove box.
Right, exactly. And I keep the trunk locked and everything, all right? But there have also been instances where, when they pull me out of the car, which I do not consent to a search, okay, because that's another way they can get in your car. If you consent to them searching your car, do not consent. They'll probably pull you out anyway, like they do me. And they have went in my glove box. They have taken the key out of my ignition unlocked the glove box, clearly illegal. They have broken my lock on the glove box and gone through it anyway. All right, so I'm not saying that these are always practical
Foolproof
ways,
right.
you know, but this is how it's done. Now, I will also segue to a segment we call Adventures of Gene and Jay, because Gene and Jay, yeah, no relation to anybody up here or that we might know of. So, like I said, I have a sports car. It's a Volkswagen, but Gene actually has a Tesla. Okay, Teslas, which, contrary to popular belief, are not as expensive as you might think. They're kind of affordable, you know, and I mean like maybe within the $30,000 to $40,000 range, you can get a Tesla. But the interesting thing that he told me about was that the police actually tried to stop them, Gene and Jay, hypothetically, one day, driving throughout let's say the Bronx, and they pulled the car over. All right, undercover cops, they ordered him out of the car. Now, the interesting thing about Tesla is that they have something called valet mode. All right, valet mode is basically if you were to, you know, give your car to a valet, they can only go a certain speed limit, but they can only open the doors. They can't open the glove box; it's automatically locked. They can't go in your trunk. Okay, so that if you put your car in valet mode, the cops cannot go into that the glove box or the trunk. All right. But another good thing about it is that the way you lock the trunk and the glove box. Now, if you remember episode 1, we talked about how police can get at your phones, right? They can use biometrics. Biometrics are like your fingerprints, the eye scan, the face scan, stuff like that. Police can order you to give your fingerprints, order you to use your face to unlock your phone. But what they cannot do is they cannot demand that you put in your password or do the zigzag stuff, okay? Because that is considered something in your mind, and they would have to then get a search warrant to go into that phone, okay? So I say that because the interesting thing about valet mode is that it does not use biometrics to put it in valet mode, but it uses a PIN code. So once you put your car in valet mode, they cannot, like they did me, take my key out of the ignition and use it to unlock that glove box. They would have to know your code to get access to your glove box and your trunk, okay? So I would think that they would need a search warrant, which they should have gotten in the first place. So that is just another, you know, lesson on car stops. Now, shout out to Elon Musk. I'm gonna be waiting for your phone call. If you get a lot of people buying Teslas, you know why, it's because of the show. So just holla at me.
All four of us.
Right.
Right.
That's a jump. I guess piggyback off what you said.
Mm-hmm.
I know, like in the courts though, like with the biometrics, with opening the phone, the courts are divided. So in certain states that's true, in other states it's not.
Yeah, that's a fact.
In addition to with the car stops, so a police officer can order you out of a car. So I know before I became an attorney, I was like, you can't order me out of the car.
I think that's everybody.
I was like, nah, I gave you no reason to get out. I'm not getting out.
and that's when they can break the window. They can call their, I think, ESU unit, emergency service unit, take you out of there, so they can. One of the reasons, like, they can search your car, again, for the instrumentalities of the crime if they smell marijuana. Now, smelling marijuana, they can search anywhere, because that marijuana could be coming from anywhere, even in the trunk. And another way they can search your vehicle is if they arrest you for a particular reason.
That's called a search incident to a lawful arrest. Right.
No, but it's so important to know that, because car stops have historically been used as a way of trying to prosecute people or to figure out how to arrest someone who really hasn't committed any crime.
Yeah.
Yep.
You know, I got to tell you, growing up, one of the things that I didn't mention before that fed into me wanting to be a lawyer is that I was always stopped. Back in the 70s, my father had a car called a Buick Electric Deuce and a Quarter.
A Buick Electric.
Deuce and a Quarter.
So that was a good car.
225, yeah. That was like the Mercedes of that time,
Okay.
if you're from the neighborhood, you know what I mean? So,
No, you
this
get
was his
stopped.
big car. It was like big like a Lincoln, and it was all electric inside, which most cars weren't. Everything was electric inside the car. And I remember my dad used to let me drive it from time to time. And anytime I pulled that car out, I would get pulled over immediately. And it was always looking for something. But you know, it's good. Everett, you mentioned a while ago about how you learned how to handle certain situations and talk to law enforcement. And that's so important to know how to do it, because in those transactions, when they realized I was driving legally and I had all my credentials, they were trying to goad you into something to create the incident. You know what I mean? And that's why dealing with car stops is very important. You know, very often they get out nasty, license and registration. And I remember one time in particular, I got out, they said license and registration, and he asked me, where'd you get the car? And my response was my driveway, which I thought was a legitimate answer. It became very hostile.
Real quick.
What are you telling you, smart guy? I said, no, you asked me where did I get the car? It's my dad's car. I got it out the driveway. Oh, you think you're funny, huh? No, you asked me where I got the car. Well,
I think that's funny.
Hilarious.
It is funny. It is funny.
But you know, to tell you the truth, it happened all the time, and there was a close friend of mine, Ernest. I'll give you a shout out.
Shout out, Ernie.
Hey, Ernest.
We used to hang tough. I mean, all through high school. And he said, you know what you just mentioned, he said, you know, take your license and registration on your insurance card out. He used to get you an insurance card and hold it. And I remember once we were driving down Springfield Boulevard and some police came toward us and they pointed at us. So he said, I tell you what, why don't you just pull over? Just pull over, they're gonna come. And we did. So we pulled over, I put the windows down, and I held the driver's and registration and everything out the window.
So you wait, y'all made eye contact?
Yeah,
The cops was looking at you, you was looking
like,
at them?
Come get it, come on. I know y'all gonna
I
stop
know
me.
the
Come
drill.
on.
And I think everybody's had that, you know, that feeling in their stomach when they look in their rear view, they're like, oh,
That's for me.
there go the U-turn.
Yeah,
Here
here
they
they
come.
come.
Yep. Then all of a sudden it's 10-2 and you know.
But I think we scored one for us that day. They ran up, he took it, he looked at it, he never said a word. License, registration, he looked at it, and he took it and threw it back at me.
He mad. 'Cause he couldn't get
He
nothing.
couldn't get me.
You know what's crazy? It's like, this happened recently. I got pulled over in my cars, me and my wife.
In the Bronx?
No, this is Jamaica, Queens. Like actually near the train stop in Jamaica over there.
Yeah.
I got pulled over. I just picked her up, and I got pulled over by two white dudes in hoodies driving a red Jeep, right?
It's like, what you doing over here, sir?
Right, yeah, but I mean, like, that's not your typical car, like, so I'm like, all right, well, they got flashes on, let me just stop. Because, you know, you gotta be careful when you stop
Right,
for certain,
right,
you know,
right.
people. So I stopped, and, you know, he asked license, registration, whatever, and he's like, so, I gave him my New York license, but, you know, my car's registered in Virginia. He's like, oh, okay, what you doing up here? I'm like, oh, you know, I live here. You know, he's like, oh, so, how you registered in Virginia? What's going on? And we started talking, basically, and he was like, well, you know, who lives down there, yada yada. And he couldn't comprehend
That you can register somewhere
that you can
else
register
and have
your car
in-
somewhere else
Yeah.
and have it. And it's like, you know, does that mean that I'm committing a crime? Like, you know, something like that? But, you know, and that's basically how it always happens. Like, it's always undercover stopping me, you know, always. And they're always asking me these extra questions. You know, they trying to see, like, if you're nervous, you know,
If you're
how you
fidgety.
handle, if you're fidgety. They're trying to get a reason to get into your car. Because
That's right.
another thing, they can search your car if, you know, just for their safety. You know, or they can take you
Or
out of
any
the car.
movements,
Yeah, any movements, you know,
Furtive
if you're
movements.
nervous, yeah, furtive movements, you know, that's the word they always use.
You just mean
So,
it.
you know, they just ask you these questions. Now, yeah, you know, I could have said some answers like you did. Oh, the car came in the driveway, you know. But I mean, I know.
I mean, you're right. It did.
But I mean, you know, and you know, you can refuse to answer questions, but I mean, it's kind of a catch-22 because they can take that as, you know, oh, you trying
He's
to
being
hide something, you're
difficult,
being
right.
difficult, now get out the car, you know. So, you know, it goes back to what you were saying, like you got to know when to.
When it's a battle to fight.
Right.
When you just,
What battles to fight? You got to
Yeah.
pick your battles, you know, which is a lot of what we do, being minorities.
Right, and what I say to young men who talk to me about it is just remember, the courtroom is your home stadium, all right? The street is the police officer's home stadium. So you do what you have to in their stadium till you get to your stadium.
Right.
Because that's where the scales get balanced.
Right. Yeah.
I got pulled over one time because I see the cop. Like you said, I see the cop.
Here he comes.
No, we be
I said-
watching them now.
Yeah.
I see them.
I see him, and I was like, let me just pull over so he can't even say
Then
he
I
could-
ran,
that I
right,
do that
right,
again.
yeah.
So I just pulled over, waited for him to leave, and he still came. Whoop whoop. I said, oh God. So I did what you did, but I wound down all my windows.
Yep.
I got on my license, registration, insurance. I got my ID. Got it real quick. Boom, 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 and I have it there, ready. On one hand on the steering wheel. And he says, license, registration. I give it to him, and he says, you know why I stopped you? And I said, no, why? He said, because you don't have your seatbelt on. And you know, it's funny. I just pressed my seatbelt. I took my seatbelt off to reach
Get the
for
stuff.
everything. And I said, I have my seatbelt on, man. Really?
Yeah,
Really?
you know what to say.
I
Yeah.
was unfortunate. I got a ticket for that.
Yeah.
For no seatbelt?
For no seatbelt.
Wow.
That's crazy.
would've been big
see,
mad.
that's a big dude. I mean, I guess so now I just want to focus on anybody who's trying to, you know, become a sole practitioner. What advice would you have for young black, not even just attorneys, maybe young black kids,
Professional.
or professionals who want to transition into law, or just young black kids who are thinking about law school and want to open up their own practice? What are, you know, let's say maybe 3, you know, good things to look for or to avoid?
Well, if I start with the current attorney who wants to go into private practice, you really have to find an area you are passionate about, okay? Because practicing law, really, if you're going to be in private practice, it's as close to 24/7 as it gets, okay? So you really have to like what you're doing, and you have to see the outcome. And the outcome can't simply be money. I mean, you make more money in private practice, but the outcome can't simply just be money, because that gets tired really quick. And I will tell you the things that I have done personally where I got satisfaction is not things I've made money from, it's things where I actually made a difference, okay? And you know, I shared earlier with the fact that something that I did 10 years ago, matter of fact it's longer than that now, was I went to Ghana, West Africa with a good friend of mine who's off of Wall Street. And other things is, if you're gonna go into private practice, those of us who wanna do that, you need to talk to other people in other disciplines who you can work with, whether it be banking, real estate, whatever it is, because you want to be able to get real good clients in who can help carry your practice while you can do other things that you really like.
So just to stay right there, because that's kind of a topic I wanted to discuss. How did you really build your client base, you know, as a private practitioner? Because I think that's a lot of what deters people from doing
Yeah.
that. You know, especially us, because you know if we wanna help our community doesn't necessarily come to us. You know, because sometimes there's a view is like,
Well,
what
see-
you feel you got in this? You know,
Yeah,
I want a
real
real
lawyer.
lawyer
Yeah, real
or something
lawyer.
like that. So.
Well, see, let me disabuse you of that notion, because I used to think that too, that our community doesn't come to us. It does. You just have to learn to meet them where they were, because I was told by an attorney who was in private practice when I came out that don't think that, they will come. See, we have to begin approaching them not just on a business level, but on the social level, talking to them. Let's go back to the barbershop, which I think is a great black institution, okay? I watched my dad talk to everybody about everything, okay? The kids, what's going on in the economy, what's happening in the White House, what's happening locally, and from that, you begin to hear what problems are and what people's needs are, okay? Now, to answer your question better, I listened to what our community needed. Most people at the time I was going into private practice was trying to figure out how to deal with their housing issue, either by buying a piece of property, getting a good place to live, either renting, or they had issues with selling a piece of property, or they had inherited a piece of property. Southeast Queens, the economy of Southeast Queens comes a lot from real property, either by buy, sell, the banking part of it, the renting part of it. So that's something that was really needed. So it wasn't so much that I jumped into real estate because I wanted to go there, it's what the community needed. But I liked it, okay? I actually liked it. because people were having all kinds of problems with real estate. So it grew just immediately out of that and having a working knowledge of what people had to do. Because I was working full-time, but people always came to me for advice. So I began taking cases on, one at a time. And then honestly, it blew up overnight. It honestly blew up overnight. And then I had one time when Chase Bank actually came to us and said, you're in the community, would you be interested not only in representing people in the community, would you represent the bank in doing closing, which became now an institutional client. Well, we've been sent people all over the place. In fact, we had to expand the office. We had to get another house to go with the regular structure to do closings in, and it grew from there. The thing is, you got to be in it though, all right? Because some people, you know, they'll try to do something on the side. It doesn't really work that way because the opportunities are there. So once I began talking to people just generally about what it is that they wanted and they needed, it took off from there. And that's the best way I can possibly describe that. And I always tell people first, do what you like, all right? Because if you do what you like, it doesn't really feel like work, okay? But I ask young men, what is it, and young ladies, what is it that really grabs you? The problem I have is that a lot of them want to do things to become famous.
Yes.
Okay, but a lot of them don't focus on the amount of work that goes into it.
Right.
If you're going to do something worthwhile, it's a lot of work, all right? So the way, again, I push back is, tell me what you like. Because if you like it, it really doesn't feel like work. I like what I do, okay? I like being a stable person in the community who people come to and talk to. I like that. I even feed off of that to some extent. But I like making a change. So what I really like doing is making a change in someone's life, because I took certain cases where I make a change in someone's life. Again, the project I've talked about was someone who I went over to Africa with. We were able to produce a factory that made pharmaceutical products for, you know, generic drugs for West Africa, Ghana and a good bit of West Africa. Now, I made money. I didn't make millions of dollars from doing it, but the satisfaction of it, where people got jobs in the local village. A young kid came up to me and shook my hand and said, now my dad has a job. Those things really meant a lot to me, and I made a difference in that situation. You know, I remember taking a case of a woman who her house was taken from her by a guy she was getting ready to marry, and what happened was she put his name on the deed just before they got married.
And he took off.
Well, no, this was terrible. He did worse. But long story short, I was able to sue, and a few attorneys turned this down. I didn't make any money off this case. A few attorneys turned it down, and I was able to get the house back in her name because it was considered a breach of contract. Instead of a ring, you get the ring back, she got the house back. You know what I mean? Those little things.
That's a win.
And that was a win. But what it did in terms of generating business and referrals was astronomical. There's a lot of business out there. You know, sometimes you're afraid to make the leap, but once you make the leap and people know you. But you know what? People want to know who you are when they come to you. They know you're a lawyer. And what I always do is I take a moment and I talk to people about who they are, and I tell them who I am. If you want one really good hint. Now, you can't walk into my office and not know who I am. First of all, if you go down the hall, I have a lot of paintings, all right? A lot of paintings of African American people, so on and so forth. If you go into my conference room, I have pictures of my entire family. So you understand that I'm a family guy. You understand that I'm from Southeast Queens. You understand I ain't trying to go nowhere, okay? I'm gonna be here. That gives them a certain level of, wait a minute, I'm talking to somebody who I can relate with. Oh yeah, they happen to be my lawyer too.
Right.
Okay, now see, my dad, by running a barbershop, you know, they call him Hop, that's his name, okay? He happens to be the barber. But what they look at is a guy who's their friend, who they can hang out with, they can talk to, so on and so forth. And we got to get back to that in terms of developing the business. So when you go out and you talk to people, let them get a sense of who you are, okay? And then once they like you, everything else becomes academic, okay? But again, pick who you want. But with the younger kids, unfortunately, you got to show them something shiny, okay?
It's true.
You got to show them something shiny, and then when you get them interested by showing them something shiny, then you can get them to really pick a profession. So you can say, yeah, maybe you won't make it to the NBA, but you can represent an NBA player.
Right.
And then they begin to see it because they're caught up in the bright lights. And I don't really blame them because this is the world we're in, okay? So you got to get to them a little bit differently. But you got to want to work. If you don't like working, leave private practice.
Gotcha.
No doubt.
You got any advice? No?
Criminal defense is hard.
Yeah.
It's emotional.
Yeah.
It's taxing.
So we haven't talked really about the emotional toll in that. Like, you want to explain that a little bit?
I mean, you're really, as a criminal defense attorney, going through your client's trauma at the same time. You're not necessarily going through exactly what they're going through because you're not looking at jail time, but you're going through the ringer between trial, discovery, sitting down and telling the client, hey, the offer is life in prison. Like, those are the conversations that you have to have, and it's emotionally taxing. But the reward at the end of it is your client goes free, your client gets to start life over, your client actually gets a second chance at life.
Right.
I did a trial last year, and the offer for my client was 12 to life. My client had not spent a summer outside of prison since he was like 12. And he caught a case, 12 to life, and I said, hey, listen. And I remind a lot of my clients, like, at this point, we're in a relationship because we're in this for the long haul.
Right.
Because I want clients to know, hey, I'm here for the long haul, you can trust me, we have to do this. And we took the case to trial. There's this thing that we have called 30-30, meaning if they don't present the case in a certain amount of time, the case gets dismissed.
Speedy trial, basically.
Speedy trial.
Yeah.
So in this case, I needed 183 days. I got 182. And it was a violent felony. We went to trial. We got a not guilty, and I cried. My client cried. My co-counsel cried. Like, it was emotionally taxing because I got to see my client. Finally, he was going to get to enjoy a summer for the first time in over 20 years.
And how long was that case active since he got arrested?
2 years. 2 years. He got arrested 2017, and we tried it in 2019.
And he was in that whole time?
No, he was out.
He was out.
He was out. But
Wow.
I think for me, the hardest part was sitting him down and saying, hey, if it's a guilty verdict, you may end up spending the rest of your life in prison.
Yeah.
But this is where we are. We have to try the case. They're not going to do anything better, so you have to trust me. If you don't trust me, I can't try this case. And I tell clients all the time, if you don't trust me, we can't move forward.
Right.
And I didn't try a case after that last year because I was so emotionally drained from that case.
Right. Yeah. I mean, to do our work, you have to. You can't do our work if you're going to be emotionally drained. Like, it just takes so much because you're taking on more than a case.
Yeah.
Right.
You're
You're
taking
taking
your
on
client's life.
all the problems our clients have.
Exactly.
From
And
emotional to therapy,
trauma,
financial,
Yeah.
whatever issues they're going through with their wife or
Yeah, their
husband.
family.
Yeah, family
Like,
law.
you're going through
Yeah.
everything with them.
Yeah, it's never just criminal law.
Never.
You can't just know criminal law. You have to know family
Immigration.
law, immigration. You have to know all types of stuff, and all of that brings drama and emotional pain and hurt and stuff. So it's a lot to balance. So, you know.
What I want to add to what she said, I like this, the phrase you used about a new start,
Right.
because a lot of folks need a new start, okay? And when I go back to the real estate stuff I was doing, one of the things I was proud to be able to do is to educate my community to how bankruptcy could be used, because that gives people a new start. Because a lot of folks have problems at a certain point in their life. Right? Someone may have been ill, they may have been young and made a lot of foolish mistakes. And the thing is, well, how do you get a fresh start? And something like bankruptcy can be used in a very effective way to do it if you qualify. So as part of the whole package that I would do, I would actually get people into Chapter 7 bankruptcy, have them discharged, and a year later they're buying a house.
Right.
So here you had real economic growth, where you were basically in the toilet, and now you're riding in a much different situation. And I've always loved investing in real estate because it's the one thing God ain't making no more of and continues to increase.
Right.
So and believe me, you can build financial worth from doing something like buying real estate. And I've gotten people to go from bankruptcy to buying a piece of property, then buying another piece of property, and then leveraging those properties to do all kinds of things, start a business and put their kids through college.
Well, you know, I would say this. You would never know that bankruptcy could be used as a tool for something positive, because the way I've heard of bankruptcy,
It's
it means
negative.
like, oh, you're broke, you've done this, you know, I've never heard it explained in a way. Well, I guess because in our community, you know, you who have done bankruptcy, and you can sit here and you can say to us, you know, bankruptcy can actually be an effective tool. I've never heard bankruptcy in a positive light. You know what I mean? It's
Right.
always
But
been.
it sounds, I mean, monopoly, right?
Right.
The goal was not to go bankrupt.
Right,
you know? So
right,
always
right.
heard
It's
a
always like
negative-
bankruptcy is not something
Yeah,
you want or
want,
something
yeah.
you should do.
Right.
And now you're saying, no, you don't have to put a negative connotation on bankruptcy. It really opens your eyes to things that you really don't know, even though you're an attorney
right.
yourself.
Right, yeah.
Because some people would never get out of debt unless they were able to file it. And like I said, a fresh start. Now, the laws have changed over time, and there's certain things you can't discharge, but a lot of things you can. Get rid of basically all your credit cards. That's not a problem. Student loans, well, you just gotta hang on.
Yeah, you gotta hang on.
That's not going anywhere.
They ain't going nowhere.
Make it sad out.
That's my advice.
We gotta get rid of them
See
things.
if you really want to do law
Right.
before you take up them loans.
Right,
because,
right.
well, that's
Go to public school.
Yeah.
But I have seen
Shout out
someone
Cutie.
go I have seen someone go through bankruptcy, then get real property, have equity in it, refinance the real property, and pay off all the student loans. I have seen
Wow.
that's a way to do it as well.
I mean, you giving me ideas, Mr. Hopkins.
Giving the world ideas.
Right. You giving me ideas.
Way to go.
All right. I mean, so listen. I think we pretty much wrapping up here. But I think this was a crucial episode for Black History. I think every year in February we're gonna do something like this. So I appreciate y'all for being here. And we'll do a cheers. Cheers for
Cheers to me. No.
cheers being black. Black professionals. All right, man.
Cheers, guys.
Go vote. Go vote. All right, man. Appreciate you all for tuning in. Remember, subscribe. We'll see y'all next time.
Dark tie, dark glasses, dark shirt, that's dark fashion. I can't stand it, no ration. The L's are given, that's my passion. In other words, I am smoking you in your cubicle. Like recycling styrofoam, you're unusable. See, it's undeniable that we are the realest. And you just be miserable, wishing that you can be us, but really you fear us. Want us to fuck with y'all like Kanye, but in my eyes you looking like Brandon, and I'm DeAndre. Yeah, I'm dunking on him, but I keep it low. Cause if the nigga come out, you know how that will go. Another nigga dead, another trigger pull, but they never wanna talk about what triggered you. Alright. Damn. Cause if the nigga come out, you know how that will go. Another nigga dead, another trigger pull, but they never wanna talk about